Hi, Michaeleen. Welcome on the Coffee and Pens podcast. Let's start with a short introduction.
Yeah, so I'm Michaeleen Doucleff. I'm a science correspondent at National Public Radio in Washington, but I work from home. And I'm also the author of Hunt, Gather, Parent. It's a book about how cultures around the world have raised kids for thousands of years.
Thank you. Let's start with the first question. What is your favorite coffee?
I'm a tea drinker. Sorry, but I do like lattes.
Okay. Yeah, that's funny. That's the answer I usually get. Okay.
I wish I could drink coffee. I love coffee, but after a couple of days, it starts giving me a headache in the morning if I don't. I wake up with a headache. So.
Do you get very fidgety, very get a lot of energy?
Yes. I love coffee. I love decaf, iced coffees, lattes, but I can drink very little of it, the real stuff. My husband drinks enormous quantities. So
I'm starting to think that's something authors have in common. I've heard that 3 or 4 times now, that I love coffee, but I can't drink it. Anyway, let's start about the book. So as it's very clear in your book, you did a lot of traveling. So you visited at least 3 places. Yeah. And the first thing that I wonder, if you're open to talk about this, is the budget. Like, did your publisher help you with that budget? How did you budget for all of this?
Yeah, it's a great question. I actually did almost all of the traveling before I sold the book. So I actually did it on my own dime. And I really was hoping to just pay that off with the advance. I was hoping that the advance would pay off my salary for a year for me to write the book, and then the cost of the traveling. And to be honest, the traveling actually was less expensive than I thought it was going to be, because we weren't staying in very fancy accommodations at all, right? And I think listeners would be surprised at how much it cost. That it was almost entirely the plane fare, really, at the end of the day, and then money for translators and on the ground help. But I think you can travel pretty cheaply if you're willing to take budget flights and not staying in fancy places. A lot of the money is the hotel, right? I saved a ton of money because we weren't really staying in hotels.
Okay. Can you elaborate a little bit about your travels for the readers or listeners that have not read your book?
Yeah. So my daughter and I went down to the Yucatan in Mexico. We flew to Cancun, and then the little village that we went to was about 2-hour drive from there. And it was very reasonable to stay in the village. We paid for our accommodations with a family, but again, it's very, very rural, no air conditioning. It was the middle of the summer. It was one of the hottest places I've ever been. They were going through a heat wave. And so even at 2:00 in the morning, it was 95 degrees Fahrenheit. And it was rough. It was rough accommodations. We were not staying at a resort. But so that trip was actually very, not very expensive, because it was just basically the flight and the car. And then we flew up to the Arctic in northern Canada, and the flight is very expensive up there. I don't really understand, but to get to Yellowknife is cheap in Canada, but then once you fly up to Nunavut in the Arctic, it's very expensive. And that, again, was almost all of the flight. And then we stayed with a family and we paid them, but it was very reasonable. And then we flew to Tanzania, and again, the flight, expensive. And this ended up being our most expensive trip, because we ended up with a translator, a security guard, and a cook. The translator didn't want to come without a cook. And so we had to hire a cook. And each person was from a different tribe or ethnic group. And so we had a great time, and they were but it was more expensive than I wanted it to be, because I had to pay all of them besides the travel. And so that was a very long flight to Arusha, 3 planes, and then an 8-hour drive on kind of rough roads. That was the longest trip by far. Again, the accommodations were cheap because we were basically camping.
Yeah. So is this reason, the whole financial reason, the main reason you went with a traditional publisher, or was there another reason as well?
I didn't really know, to be honest. I look back on it and I knew nothing. I had an agent contact me, and he kind of continued to contact me over and over again and kind of convinced me to write this book. I didn't really want to write this book. I want to write another book. And I kind of shopped around a little bit, emailing some other agents, and I was kind of lazy, and I just did what he told me. And I think in some ways, I don't know, I'm kind of questioning the whole thing, because I don't know. I don't really know. To be honest, it's an entire universe, right? The publishing world and like what happens. And I knew nothing of it. And he knows that he knew everything, right? Because he's been in it like 30 years. I mean, he's a great guy. His name is Alex Glass. He's a really nice guy. And he sold my book really well. You know, it's going to be in like 30 languages and like, you know, amazing things. But like, I felt like a lot of it, I was kind of along for the ride, and I was, you know, and I didn't really know what was going on. And to be honest, Simon and Schuster, who's published it, I'm part of a little boutique publishing imprint of Simon and Schuster called Avid Reader. They've been great. They've been amazing. Like they're super responsive. They promoted the book. I can't complain about any of it. I think it's just more like, it wasn't a lot of consciousness on my part, and more just like what people were telling me to do.
Right. What do you think were the biggest benefits though?
To Simon and Schuster? I mean, they have this massive amount of knowledge and connections, right? Like they've done it. So the guy that I went with, the publisher's name is Jofi Ferrari Adler. I picked him because he kind of had publishing New York Times bestsellers down to like a science. You know, at the time, I think he published like 6 or 7 of them. And he kind of knows what needs to be done to get the book out there and to get people reading it. And he did it. You know, they made this amazing cover. They helped me get good people in the back. And then they had the publicist and the marketing and him, you know, made this incredible post-publication plan for the marketing. I mean, they did fantastic, you know. I couldn't have asked for a better launch, you know.
All right. That's amazing.
So, yeah, I mean, it was stressful. It was incredibly stressful, and one of the most stressful months of my life. And it's why I haven't written another proposal, because I don't do all that again. And I've even thought about going with a smaller publishing company because of how stressful it all was. There was a lot of pressure for the book to do well. And it was very fast turnaround. And so, I mean, there's all that great stuff that I just said, but there is this like enormous amount of pressure on me, you know, to like, I had to write essays to go with the book. I probably did like 100 interviews, you know, I had to go on TV. Some people would love all this stuff, and it was stressful. It was hard, you know?
Yeah. Do you think that was the biggest challenge?
You know, I think there are 2 biggest challenges. I think the publicity was hard. I think hearing the criticism is hard. I mean, there's no doubt, like, especially on Twitter, people said really mean things about me. And
really?
Yeah, it was really bad for like a weekend. It was horrible. Like things that I had never even imagined people would interpret the book as they did. And it was really hard. And what ended up being harder was because of what people were saying on Twitter, it like went over and bled into my job. And like I'll start to tear up. It was horrible for like a couple of weeks. And then on top of it, there was this pressure because the book was at this top publisher, you know, for it to do really well. It just so we went on the trips, and then I sold the book. And immediately after I sold the book, I felt this like enormous amount of pressure to write like a bestseller. Right. And that's hard. That's hard for a first-time writer. Right.
Yeah.
So those, I think are the 2 biggest things, like this pressure to write something that is going to be a big seller, and then the criticism because you write one. Like if I didn't write a bestseller, I don't think people would have been so upset. Nobody would have cared, right?
Right.
But because it was so popular, I got attacked for like a couple of weeks online.
Wow, that surprises me. But that just shows that there are so many corners of the internet. Because like I'm in a community on Twitter where I just see nice people, like just everyone supporting each other. And I know there's this like scary place as well where people just criticize. But all the authors I've talked to are like people, most of them are people that are like from my corner of the internet. Like I call it my corner, you know, the corner that I'm a part of. And then it keeps surprising me when I hear like these other stories.
You know, it was really interesting because I didn't even know it was happening. It was in some other corner, like you say. And NPR was the one that like brought it to my attention, because the person didn't even, it was started by one person basically. And she hadn't even read the book. The book hadn't even come out yet. And she said this very kind of mean accusatory things. And NPR was the one that told me about it. It was, I don't know. It was very surprising to me. But supposedly the publisher, Jofi, told me that it happens with every popular book now. That there's like some backlash from somebody, that somebody sees like the book, and a popular book, and then they want to like kind of get attention from it.
Okay, yeah, I can see it happening. It's a compliment, actually.
It is, but I'm thin-skinned. I'm tough. I can go live out, in a camp for weeks with, people and any person in the world. But I don't know. It's just so personal. It was such a personal attack, and anyway, it still really hurts me. It happened in March, and I still, like I say, like I'm tearing up now. Like it's still very hurtful what happened. So
that's a shame. That's a shame that it should happen.
Well, like I say, I can't complain. The book has done really well, and I think the best part of it is readers email me, every day and tell me how much they enjoy the book and how much it's helped them. So
yeah, that's the best part.
That's the best part.
I've been one of them. I've emailed you to tell you how great it is. I can't wait to buy the Spanish version to give it to my wife.
Oh, that's great.
Anyway, let's move on to a different topic. I'm wondering, so you did a lot of research. You did a lot of traveling. So I'm wondering about the time division between traveling, research, editing, writing. Could you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, it was too fast. So I actually started researching it for my job in 2018. So for my job, I went down to the Yucatan, and then later that year, I went up to the Arctic. And so I had done quite a bit of, I'd say like almost a year of research on and off for my job before I even proposed the book. And so the book proposal was really written off of those stories. And so I had like an enormous amount of research done before Rosie and I traveled. And really the first 2 trips to the Yucatan and to the Arctic were kind of repeat in some way. Like we went back to the same village. I went to a different part of the Arctic. I've been to 3 different parts of the Arctic total. So I say there's about a year of me like reading and doing 2 trips, interviewing psychologists, interviewing anthropologists. I mean, really kind of, I thought I knew a lot before, and then Rosie and I spent 7 weeks, 8 weeks traveling. And then I spent about almost exactly a year, almost exactly a year writing it all up. And so almost all of the interviews were done before I started writing it. They were done during that first year of research, and then during the travel. And then I would be writing it, and maybe if I needed a little bit more research, or I would call somebody. But it was really kind of like a big chunk of research, some traveling, and then writing with research kind of mixed in. But it was super fast. I wrote 90,000 words in like a year.
So if I got it right, it's like 1 year of research and traveling and 1 year of writing and editing as well, I suppose.
Yeah, maybe like a year and a half of research and traveling, really. I wasn't doing it full time, but it was a long, I've been doing this now really for almost 4 years, like total. Like the book took about 3 years, but I had been kind of reading about the topic for a year before then.
Okay.
And the other thing is, I want to point out, I hired an outside editor, which was huge. This woman was huge. I could not have finished this book on time without her.
Was this not something the publisher provided?
Yeah. So a bunch of my friends that have, not a bunch, but several of my friends that have published their books recommended it. They told me that the in-house editors hardly do anything and you should get one. And actually my agent thought I didn't need one, but I kind of went with my gut and I hired a woman. Her name's Carrie Fry. She was amazing. So I would send her chunks of the like a third of the book, and she would go through it, and then I would revise. And she made a huge, I thank her at the end. She made a huge difference in the book.
Do you think that was the best decision you made, or was there something else that was really important?
I think it was definitely one of them. Yeah, definitely. I mean, a good editor is like gold, right? Like I've been a journalist now for 10 years, and like, if you have a good editor, everything is different. And she has edited books for years. And so she can, because one of the problems for me was like, I'm a journalist, I write like 500,000 word pieces, right? And this is like handling the amount of text that I was handling was really hard for me. And writing that way too, like in these long, like she kept asking for more. Like as a news writer, I would just write these very boop, 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 very short, right? And she wanted, things to kind of get drawn out and bring the reader in. And so she really helped me shape it as a book. and just handle that amount of text, you know.
Do you think there was some kind of pressure from maybe your editor, from the publisher, to reach a certain word count?
You know, I overshot. They wanted like 75,000 words and I gave them 90, and they seemed fine with it. My agent was surprised that they didn't cut it down.
Okay, so they must have been happy.
Yeah, they did actually very little structural editing, you know, where you like, there was basically none, where you're like moving things around and like, it was all line editing really. And they improved it with the line editing.
Yeah, but I think the structure was well, so I understand that there was not a lot happening there.
And most of that was made during the proposal phase. So the proposal was like 50 pages long. It was long and it was very detailed. So because I had traveled and I had done so much research, I knew really what was going to go in it, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that proposals are quite long. So someone else mentioned as well that your proposal is almost a book, actually. So when it gets rejected, it's like a lot of time lost.
Yeah. Yeah. My God. Yeah.
Do you think that would hold you back from writing a second book in the same way?
No, you know, I actually wanted to write a different book. And like I said, the agent convinced me to write this book, which, I mean, he was right. He knew he could sell it, and he did. And he knew, you know, he thought it would be popular. I think really what's holding me back from, he wants me to write a proposal like today. He's like, you know, write another one because, you know, it makes him money. But I think what's holding me back is like, I don't know, the stress of it. It was really stressful, you know. I mean, on top of it, the pandemic made things worse, right? I mean, in March, my kid came home, I had no childcare, and I had to finish writing this book. You know, there's no doubt that made things worse. But the stress of finishing the book, you know, having it be good, and then on top of it, you know, facing the criticism of it, it was hard.
Yeah.
I know, I feel like it. And then on top of it, I went back to work, right? So I went back to work in September last year. So I was working like during the editing. You know, I thought I turned the book in and I'm done, and actually turn the book in, and then it's like enormous amounts of work are left. Enormous. Like 5 rounds of editing.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy. And then I finished that, and then it was like, okay, now you need to write some essays to publicize the book.
Yeah, but those helped. That's how I got drawn in. Like I read 2 of those essays. Like I read one.
Yeah, no, it totally helped.
Yeah, I read one and I said, this is similar to something I read a couple of months ago. And I know I saved the other one in Evernote. So I said, I'll have a look. Like, hey, these are about the same author. Let me have a look at the book. And, you know, I like the ideas. It's like something that resonated with me. So I got your book. So it helped.
Good. I'm glad.
So not in vain.
Yeah, no, it's true. Thank you. It makes me happy to hear that.
Awesome. So you mentioned that you actually wanted to write another book.
Yeah.
What's that about?
So before I did the parenting studies at NPR, I did a couple studies about backs and back pain, because I had really bad back pain for about 10 years. And those stories were actually more popular than the parenting ones. So I have a whole book idea around them, but I don't want to say exactly what it is, but it would be kind of similar as the parenting book, but looking at like why, when we get older, not even that old, I was like 30, like why do we have back pain? Like that's not how people used to be. And there's a reason. There's a juicy reason.
Okay. So, but you're not sharing it.
No, because I don't want to get scooped. I'm very fearful of being scooped. I was afraid I was going to get scooped on this book, even though I don't think that was going to happen. But.
Okay. But it's also like a myth busting format, because that's what it is, right?
Yes. Myth busting, and also like cross-cultural, right? I mean, like instead of navel gazing, like I like to say, like, you know, just looking at ourselves, really looking outward and seeing kind of where we've gone astray. So it's very similar.
Okay. But the plans for that are still quite unsure.
Yeah, I need to write the proposal. Supposedly the agent says the proposal doesn't have to be as long. I think he told me that the first book you write, you have to convince them more.
Yeah, once you've got a best-selling book, it's a bit easier. People want to get back to you because they know they can sell your books. That's one of the
best things. That's right. That's one of the best things of this whole, the book being popular. Because I have to say, I'm not really making any money off this book, because I paid for my, so usually if you get a significant advance, you don't get royalties, right? Because you have to sell enough books to make up your advance.
Okay.
So So I don't expect to make any money off royalties. And I basically paid my salary and I paid the travel. And then almost after taxes, almost all of it I've given back to the communities in the book. So yeah, I just want to make
That's great.
some people, yeah, which is another reason why when people attack me, it's kind of like, somebody even said that, like, because you're making money off these people. And I'm like, I'm not making money off these people. Actually, if I don't do the taxes right, I might lose money, is what I'm starting to realize.
Yeah.
So,
but and even if you're making money off those people, supposedly, you're still helping them in a way because you're sharing their story.
I hope that was one of the goals, was to somehow give back to the people in the book, and whether, money is one way. And I think valuing their ideas is another, and helping people understand and value different ways of doing things, I think is important. I mean, especially in the US, right? We have such a mix of people, and one way tends to get valued the most and respected. And I hope that the book will help people kind of see, like, oh, maybe a parent is doing it differently, but that way still has value and worth. You know?
Yeah. You mentioned that one of the key aspects in the 3 cultures that you visited, or at least into, is storytelling.
Yeah.
Do you think that you learned something from them that you then could apply to writing your book and even to your career as a journalist?
Oh, that's a good question. Like, from their storytelling?
Yeah, from their ways of storytelling, from the importance that they give it.
Yeah. Like, if there's something that I've applied by the way that they tell stories. I mean, I've always thought about the storytelling is how I interact with people, right? So I love storytelling because it's indirect, right? So you can kind of tell somebody they're doing something wrong and kind of criticize them through a story that they don't even realize you're kind of criticizing them. Okay. That's why I think a lot of cultures use story, is because it's a way of criticizing people without causing conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I think I do that more now. I hadn't thought about that. I think one of the things that they've taught that I learned is about kind of being circular more. So we tend to tell stories that are very linear, that have these progressions and resolutions. I think after being with them, I've appreciated more this kind of circular way of telling a story, where you kind of help the reader move along by circling into something. So you kind of tell them, you kind of bring them along, and then you kind of tell them the end and the resolution, and then you kind of bring them along further and kind of telling it, right? And so it's this kind of softer, I know one. This is in the book all the time. So instead of like telling people what to do, like I consciously in the book try not to say like you should, or like it's more indirect, and sometimes it actually was the passive voice, and the publisher got mad and would, or not mad, but the publisher would try to move it into the active voice, and I was like, no, I'm intentionally using the passive voice, like soften it and to make it not about directly to you, but let you make your own mind up about it. I think it's interesting how we use words, and how we use language. It's very directive in English, and very like pointed, and kind of telling people what to do, and also very conflictual, like saying things like, well, why did you open the door? Why did you do this? It's a very conflictual question. And in many, many cultures that aren't so conflictual and more cooperative, the language is such that it's softer and allows the person to kind of come to their own conclusions. And like people would never say, why did you? Like when we were in the Arctic, I never heard that question. Why did you?
That reminds me of something personal, like between like my wife and me. So she speaks Spanish, and she's like, she always says, like, for example, hay que abrir la puerta, which means like something like the door has to be opened. And I get so upset because like I know she's like, she wants me to do it, but she like kind of makes it impersonal, like someone needs to do it. Yes. And I'm like, why do you make it impassive? Like, if you want me to do it. But then I read your book, and it's like what all these cultures do. That like kind of like, instead of directly telling someone, hey, you need to open the door, it's like someone needs to open the door. Like the door needs to be opened. And I'm trying to like accept it now as something that's actually better. But I've just been raised in this Western culture. It's like bam, like directly.
Yeah, it's hit you in the face, hit you in the
Yeah.
door. That's so interesting. That's so interesting. Because I also think we think of it as like passive aggressive, like being passive is like
Yeah.
somehow bad because it's aggressive. And
Yeah.
but to be honest, in my experience, as I've become a little bit more passive, there's less conflict, at least in my life.
Mm-hmm. Maybe it's like a language rule problem. So like,
Yeah, I mean,
why
I
is
think the
passive
language,
voice wrong?
yeah, right, exactly. Why is passive voice wrong? Like in a lot of places, that's the norm, you know? So interestingly, they asked in one of the studies I was reading recently, they asked Maya kids like 8 and 9. So for the listeners, my parents raised really helpful kids, super helpful kids. And they asked the little kids like 8 and 9, like, why do you help your family? And one of the little boys said, because the work tells me to do it. Which is similar. The door needs to be closed. The door is telling you to close it, right? The work, the dishes are telling me. And it's a very like, I don't know, it's very passive, right? Because it's not the parents telling them, the kid, or I don't know, very interesting to me.
Yeah, so. It is. Okay, back to writing a little bit. Do you think there's anything else that you learned from these travels about writing?
Oh, to keep a journal. Like the first trip I went to, when we went to the Yucatan, I didn't journal every night because I was tired and I was lazy. And it made it harder to write. It was a lot harder to write. And then the next 2 trips I journaled every night, even if I thought there was nothing. I wrote everything down, and those are golden. Like those notes are so golden, because the moment is, even though you feel like you remember it, you don't. And you don't remember the feelings, and you don't remember the ideas and the words. And those notes, and I think you can tell by the book, like in the Arctic and in the Tanzania, there's a lot more interaction with Rosie and with the people. And it's because I had those scenes like written down. And in the Yucatan, I was trying to remember more. And
right. And anything else from your experience as a first-time author and a journalist that you would like to share with new authors?
I mean, I had a friend that had just written a book, and she wrote it super fast, and I could never write that fast, but she said she had to write 1,000 words a day, and she said it didn't matter what they look like. And so I could never write that fast. So I gave myself 500 words a day, and I really kind of stuck to it. And there was many days where that's all I wrote, you know? But it really helped to have like a routine. People, writers always say, you know, just like, I'm going to write 500 words a day. And if that's all I do, that's all I do, you know, because writing, you can't do it 7-8 hours every day. No, you cannot do it. No, you can do it 4 or 5, and then you need a weekend, you know? And and you know, you need time for, like, I write in my head, right? Like I write first in my head, and then the other thing that I learned while I was doing it was that I could write into the chapter. I could write myself into the point of the chapter. Like I kind of already knew what the points of chapters were, but I didn't know kind of maybe the way that they were going to move narratively. And if I didn't, I could just keep writing. Like sometimes it would be like 4,000 words in, and I'd be like, oh, this is what this chapter wants to be. And I never did that before. And then I would use maybe like 1,000 words of it or something, but I just kept writing. I kept writing, kept going, and just kind of being confident that like it would come, like the narrative arc would come. And sometimes I actually ended up using pieces of it in different chapters, you know, or for some of those essays, right? Like I never threw it out, you know, never throw it out.
Yeah, that's a big tip for any type of writer.
Yeah, never. And even if like, sometimes I'll be like, I have to write this and it has nothing to do with what I'm writing, just write it. Because that's the muse, right?
Yeah,
like,
get it out of your head.
In the muse. And you might never use it, but I think I've used almost everything I've always written, maybe a few things.
So you mentioned in your book that you traveled with your daughter, Rosie. And at some point, I remember you said that you'd like to train Rosie so that at some point she can help you with your writing, with everything that you do. Did you get any help from her with this book?
One thing that Rosie, so she was 3, so she's tiny. Okay, getting interviews from people with a 3-year-old is 100 times easier. Getting people to like talk to you, welcome you into their home, open up to you. She was like a golden ticket, like, because I travel for my job, right? And people were so much more willing to talk to me in a very informal manner around Rosie. They wanted to talk to Rosie. They wanted to be with Rosie. And so, I mean, I joke around, but I kind of want to take her with me wherever I go, because like she's older now, but like she really was like a golden ticket. Like people, and they would tell me, they would give me advice about her, right? And like And then when I got home, it's funny because I started using Rosie to help me with NPR stories too. Like I'll ask Rosie, especially about parenting stuff, like, what do you think about this? Like this idea. And she'll have really great ideas. Like one time she summarized, I think I wrote in the book, she summarized some idea like really well. And I was like, wow, like that's the nut graph. That's like the, so I think talking to your kids about your ideas, like is such a great, because they have such a different perspective. And they'll just say something and you'll be like, I didn't think of it that way. So I always talk to her about my ideas and, get her opinions. And, eventually I want her to like cut tape at NPR, the radio piece. That's the goal, is to like get her to cut tape, because I hate cutting tape, but she's already helped me so much. And when I travel for the next book, because I will eventually write the next book, but like, I will take her for sure.
Yeah.
Even though she'll be older, because she'll help. Right. And she can, at that point she can do like, she can hold the microphone. She can do some production work. You know? She knows, she's listened to so many interviews. By the time she's a teenager, she'll be like more experienced than most journalists.
Of course. Yeah, without a doubt. So Michaeleen, since we're approaching the end, is there anything that you think I didn't ask, but I should have asked?
About writing and...
Yeah, about writing or your book?
I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, I think it's one of those things that you just have to do, like, I know I made mistakes during it, but I just kind of did it, I was just kind of like figuring it out as I went. And I think that's with writing, that's what you got to do, right? The more you write, the better you get. And the publishing world is crazy. And yeah, I don't know if that helps at all. I don't know if that made any sense, but like, just, you got to do it. You got to put yourself out there and take risks.
Yeah. Okay. And then we've got two more questions.
Sure.
Something everyone wants to know, and be in a specific. So you wrote about parenting, especially about toddlers, but is there anything that you learned from those three cultures about how to calm a baby?
Oh, to calm a baby. It's interesting, like very few babies were ever upset.
Yeah. How is it possible?
So I think the biggest difference in our culture, and basically many cultures, is how much babies are held. So when Rosie was born, I felt this pressure not to hold her. Like people told me not to hold her. Like, you got to put her down or you have to hold her all the time. And to be honest, I didn't really know how to hold her, right? Like I thought you hold her like this, like the way we hold babies, right? But so everywhere we went, babies are held in carriers, right? So in the Arctic, there's these things called a Maltese, which the baby's on the back. In Tanzania, they're wrapped around. In the Yucatan, there's less of that because it's very hot. But somebody's holding the baby all the time. And there's a lot, I would say a lot of evidence that babies are meant to be held all the time. And there's this sense in our culture that like coddles them, and women women and men, they do a lot while they're holding their babies. They forage, they cook on fires, and so I think that's why babies weren't upset, because they were being held so much. Like in the Arctic, kids are inside these Maltese until basically the next kid comes along, right? Like they stay in it even to pee. Like the parent knows like when the child's going to pee, because they know so well like their body and their signs, and they'll turn them around and then let them pee. So it just shows you like how much babies are held. So my advice is like, don't feel bad about holding the baby. I mean, like if I had to do it all again, I would have carried Rosie around with me everywhere. And I would have just gone on with my life more and just carried her and brought her with. That's how babies are made. They're made to be carried and like held and not entertained. You just go on with your life. Your hands are free because the baby's in a carrier. And that is copacetic. That is where you get peace with the baby. Like people will tell you that spend time with hunter-gatherer communities, they never hear babies cry at night or in the day, because they're just held. Yeah,
that's our experience as well. When we hold Mia, like when we have her in a carrier, and when we're walking, like as long as we're not too long in the same space, she can be in that carrier for 5 hours, 6 hours, and she won't complain. But then when we're at home, and even when I'm just holding her normally, as you said, like what we suppose is normal, she doesn't last 5 minutes.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy. And strollers, crazy idea.
Yeah, she liked those as a little baby, not as much anymore now.
Oh my God, Rosie never. We could not put her in
Yeah.
strollers. She would just scream like.
Oh, okay. I'm aware of your time. So, final question.
Yes.
What is your secret?
My secret to writing?
Yeah.
Okay, I think there's two things.
Of course.
One, I'm always questioning what I see. You know, like the stroller. Like,
yeah.
Okay, like right now, like I have like 10 stories in my mind that are all things that we think are like normal and like appropriate. And like I'm always thinking, wait a second, is that right? You know, like just, I don't know, there's so many assumptions we make, even in science, right? And I'm always like, is it right? Is it like, especially the big problems, like back pain or parenting, like if we were really doing it right, we wouldn't have it. Right?
Yeah.
Like, so I don't know. I'm always just like thinking about that. I think the second thing is like, I connect with my feelings. I mean, you saw like, you're like the only one who made me cry, but like, I like really stay in tune to that. Like what makes me feel something. If it's making me feel something, then it's going to make other people feel something. Oh, right. And so then like, I stay in tune with that. And then the other thing is I never write ideas down. So I write like a journal of what things happened, right? But like I never write like ideas down because if they're really good ideas, they'll come back.
Yeah. Okay.
And I only pursue the things that are just like nagging me because if they're nagging me, they're gonna like resonate.
Yeah. All right.
I don't know if that helps at all, but
yeah, that was perfect.
You gotta have a big heart and you gotta question.
Oh yeah, that was perfect. Thank you. Before we go, where can people find out more about you and your book?
You know, I'm on Twitter sometimes. It's at Foodie Science on Twitter, but you can also email me, mdoucleff@NPR. I try to respond to almost all of them. Otherwise, you can get it online. And yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. I love talking about writing because not many people do.
So great to have you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And good luck with your baby.
Thank you.